Now, the asylum seeker living in a migrant hotel whose arrest sparked protest in the Essex town of Epping was yesterday convicted of the crime he was arrested for, which was sexually assaulting a woman and a teenage girl.
Now, under the law, asylum seekers sentenced to more than 12 months in prison should be deported. But the very fact that they've come to Britain saying they face torture or persecution in their home country means they can appeal.
So, should all criminal asylum seekers be deported? Well, researcher in immigration and asylum, Dr. Rakib Ehsan, says that should happen automatically, no matter whether they're being returned to. But Amnesty International Steve Simmons says that is inhumane. Where do we begin? What do you believe? What do you believe and why in this debate?
Well, I think, firstly, we need a human rights framework which ultimately prioritises the collective security of law-abiding British citizens over the individual rights of foreign nationals. And I think, especially when we're talking to foreign nationals who are guilty of committing crimes in the UK, that rule should apply. And I think that at the moment, the way our human rights architecture is constituted, I think that we haven't got the balance quite right.
Can I clarify, when you say foreign nationals, do you mean not just asylum seekers? Anybody who is a national here but was born elsewhere?
No, I'm talking about non-British citizens,
right, so
non-UK citizens. And I think that when we're looking at this particular case, we're talking about a crime of a decidedly sexual nature. So I think that when it comes to cases such as this, I think British public safety needs to be prioritised. And I know that that is a very controversial view in some quarters, but I think that's the way the law should be applied.
Steve, how would you defend that?
Well, I think the starting point is to understand what human rights are. They're the property of every single one of us because we are human beings. And we don't lose our human rights because we're born somewhere else or because we behave in a certain way.
Do we lose our human rights if we commit a crime, though, particularly one of a serious nature?
No, we never lose our human rights. Of course, we may be subject to punishment for our offences, and the man that you've just referred to will be sentenced in a criminal court and will suffer criminal consequences. The issue of whether he should be expelled somewhere where he may be tortured is a separate matter. Of course, I do not know the answer to that question because, again, I don't know the strength of his claim. If he has no fear of torture or persecution, again, he will be removed from the country.
Going wider than just this case, but also, you know, arguing that there will be victims of these crimes, in this case, a young girl and a woman, who also say they have human rights.
And they do, and that is why we have a criminal...
They don't feel they're being protected when they have communities being housed in the centre of their community, where it isn't clear what those people have done or their nature.
Well,
I'm just putting the argument.
No, I understand, but we all have to pause a little bit before we start casting aspersions on a whole group of people.
But that's the concern.
No, I understand it's the concern, but the fact is that any single one of us in this country, wherever we are born, including British citizens, are capable of committing offences, and many British citizens do, including the offences this man has been charged with.
Okay.
Dr. Rakib, if the person seeking asylum has come from a country where if they were returned, they would be tortured or, you know, murdered in many cases, severely at risk of that, and the sentence that they receive for the crime they've committed is over 12 months, but not actually a crime where that would be appropriate, you're effectively, by deporting them, sentencing them to torture and death.
Well, I think that's a serious moral dilemma that we have here.
And that's the moral dilemma that we're dealing with.
And you're prepared to take that gamble and that risk?
Well, I think, for me, what's very clear is that when you look at the risks, I think that British public safety has to be prioritised. Now, the UK government ultimately has a responsibility, whether it comes to border security or public safety, to ultimately prioritise the collective safety and security of British citizens.
So I mean, in this particular case, I mean, he was Christian, you know, and he might say, and we don't know yet, he might say he's going to face religious persecution. But imagine if somebody was gay. We know that some of those countries, they have terrible homophobia. Are we saying that, right, OK, yes, you've served that crime, but in our court, we're not going to sentence you to death here because we protect your human rights. We're going to give you a 12-month prison sentence or whatever. But actually, when it comes to the crunch, we're going to send you back to that country, even though it's pretty nailed on you're going to face the worst kind of punishment from people like that. We're prepared to do that? Is that what Britain's about?
I think when it comes to having an effective refugee policy, you have to blend compassion with control and generosity with hard-headedness. Now, I think that when you look at the small boats crisis, if you look at the data for the first half of this year, 7 in 10 small boat migrants were men aged 18 to 39. I think what we need is an asylum system which actually prioritises women and girls, especially those who belong to ethno-religious minorities in conflict zones. At the moment, because of the small boats crisis, we don't have an asylum system like that, which is being overwhelmed.
Just a quick, just on this asylum system, if there were safe and legal routes and people were applying in normal ways, would this diminish the risk that we would know a bit more about the people that are coming here because they've been into embassies and they've applied for visas? It's part of the problem because these people are coming here without safe and legal routes and therefore we don't know anything about them.
I think that's part of the problem, although we shouldn't overestimate how successful that could be in addressing the issues. Not everybody is going to be able to access an embassy around the world to be able to make their asylum claim.
But you will always get some of them.
So we're always likely to see people who come by routes without a visa.
Right.
So what is the answer?
The answer is to simply apply the human rights laws we as a country agreed with the rest of the world all those years ago in as fair and an efficient way and recognise that every single one of us, whether we are British or not, is entitled to have our human rights fully respected. If we do wrong, there is a criminal justice system by which we should be punished. But torture, slavery, things like this are absolutely barred for each and every one of us as a human being, and we should respect that.
All right. Thank you very much. Very clear.
Thank you for both your views. Very interesting. Thank you.